Welcome to Know Your Rights. So, have you ever been punished by a teacher? I'm sure many of us have, and some of you may be parents, and you may hear that your children complain that they were punished for misbehavior at school. So there are some of us who are okay with it, and some who are not. So we have this division of two groups. One group justifying it because they believe that it helps gain the respect of their teachers, or it is an effective method of correcting misbehavior, and eventually it can lead to children become more responsible adults. But despite these beliefs, the research indicates quite a different story. So let's find out. I have with me today Dr. Tush Wickramanayaka, who is a medical doctor and also the founder and chairperson of Stop Child Cruelty organization. Welcome to Know Your Rights.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. So, Dr. Tush, let me first understand what is corporal punishment?
Yeah. So, corporal punishment, as defined by the UNCRC, which is the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child, which is what Sri Lanka as a government has upheld since 1992, which is when we signed up to it. And that is a definition that the Ministry of Education as well as the Ministry of Children's Affairs uphold. And the definition is that any form of physical punishment given with an intention to cause some form of discomfort and however light. So those three are the key words. It also defines it as being non-physical punishment, such as kneeling or standing in the corner of the classrooms, or going outside standing on one foot, and all the weird ways that our children get punished. It also defines verbal punishment as a form of corporal punishment. Corporal basically means body, but because the mind affects the body, they also negate verbal punishment. Anything that makes the child belittled, humiliated, scared, and discriminated, words that we use in our schools such as umba, bambolang or gona haraka, all of those things are negated and disallowed according to the Human Rights Act that we signed with the UNCRC.
So most of those things, the techniques that you told me, so I'm sure many of us, at least some of us may have been subjected to them. So the definition says intentionally or willfully. What is important of that?
So the intention, I mean, a punishment, basically I think what we need to understand is there's a difference between punishment and discipline.
Yes.
What's happening in modern day life is that punishment is used as discipline. Okay, the difference is discipline is meant to be a positive reinforcement.
Yes.
And you get positive consequences at the end of it, where the child or the adult or whoever is misbehaving reflects upon their behavior and finds solutions within themselves, which are usually, if you're doing it the right way, are long lasting. Whereas punishment is a punitive process merely given to cause humiliation or degradation of a human being, and that is very short lasting, and the consequences are dire and negative, and therefore punishment is not a way of discipline, and that's the basic difference that should be. So going back to your question, as to how do we then discipline a child, is simply through non-punitive processes. I mean, I'll give you a very simple example. Yes, you and I have been subjected to punishment in school, but this is a modern world, and we talk of our country being in the world as part of a world member, and we who want to be going forwards in with the first and the second worlds, we are no longer a third world country. If we take these archaic, ancient ideas with us, we cannot move forward as a nation. And we always talk that our children are the future. So we are treating our future in our history. It just doesn't make any sense, does it?
Yes. And also now physical punishment also can lead to a range of implications such as mental and emotional harm. So
yes, you're right. There have been over 250 research proven both here nationally and internationally, to show the negative consequences of punishment, but there isn't a single research that has proven any benefits. So what are these negative consequences? First and foremost, it's the injury per se, the physical pain. That is a short term. I mean, you might have an injury that will heal, there may or may not be a scar, but that's usually a temporary measure. But the more catastrophic consequences are the mental, the psychological effect that children have. First and foremost, it takes away their self-worthness. Okay, they are humiliated, they don't like being insulted, especially in front of their peers. So then they begin to dislike school. So you have truancy and fallout. Good students, clever students start to drop out and fall back on their studies. When they go into situations later on in life where they are challenged, whether it's in their work situation or in their studies, higher studies, they are afraid because they know that they haven't got that self-confidence to move on. And when they do have some form of conflict in their life, the way they resolve it then is through violence, through aggression, because that's the way that that was resolved for them when they were younger. And that's the very reason why we have a high incidence of ragging in our higher institutions, in our universities. In Southeast Asia, there's research proving that there is a direct correlation between corporal punishment in school and ragging in universities. So all of this are negative consequences, and ultimately what we have is a child who is broken, and to mend that child comes at a cost. The cost is, there's cost for medical care, there's cost in terms of the education. You know, it doesn't just affect, the way I see it, corporal punishment doesn't just affect the child. There are three victims here. The child, of course, who is the main victim, the family, I'll explain that to you in a moment, and of course the teacher and the school. So the whole education system crumbles because of that. The teacher may have to resign, they regret. I mean, no teacher ever loves, you know, not even a parent, once you hit a child. Do you thrive on it? At that instant moment, the anger is out, but then you regret. So there is a lot of self-harm to the punisher.
Yes.
That happens. So there's negative consequences in terms of medical care, education. When the child doesn't come to school, there's a lot that needs to go on to rehabilitate the child and the teacher. Then if it becomes serious enough, it needs to go to the penal system. So there's a cost to the police and the penal system and the law courts. And then finally, there's a cost to the nation, where you have several broken individuals, and the health of the nation, the development of the nation. And that's a classic example what you have seen over in the parliament maybe last month or so, when we've seen hooliganism within the parliament. And that, I believe, is a classic example of how aggression and violence may have overtaken bullying in their childhood, and that is why they feel that aggression is a form of answer to the problem.
So basically the expectation is, when you punish a child, that the child to instantaneously obey the teacher and not repeat the same act, you know, the misbehavior. But what really happens is the child has that resentment, anger, feeling of embarrassment, sadness, and then that lingers on.
Yes, research has shown that the punishment stays within your limbic system. That's a specific part within the brain that it stays there. I mean, the classic example is, there are people who actually thrive. They justify, they galore, in jubilation of the punishments that they have received in their past. Yeah. But if you ask the same people, can you remember your 4th birthday? Or what did you do on your 10th birthday? They can't remember that. So that is the sheer contradiction, is that pain is in your system. You're justifying it for whatever reason, and it's actually your way of coping. So for you to turn around and say, yes, we were punished and that's why we are good citizens the way we are, is a simple justification of the way that you're handling it, and not the justification of the punishment per se. Because if that was the case, they would have forgotten. If it was such a lovely experience, just like the celebrations they had on their birthdays, they would have forgotten it.
Yeah. So a long time back, historically speaking, like corporal punishment was legal, and then there were resistance, you know, to it, and then we see today that still some people, you know, justifying it, and there's another group who is against it. So in Sri Lanka, what was the situation? I mean, if you look from the history.
Yes. So historically, actually, corporal punishment for children was disallowed by our kings.
Okay.
Especially, there's research proven by Mulder, very famous historian, who found Sellipi, you know, the ancient forms of writings in our country, in the times of King Vijay Bahadur II, III, and several other kings, that corporal punishment for our children was disallowed. Those days we didn't have schools, but we had those Rishi Varun and Acharya Varun for the king's children,
Yes.
and it was disallowed at that time. But it was introduced to us during the colonial rule. Okay, it was a form of submission, kneeling down and being caned by the white towards the browns was a form of submission.
Yes.
And with time, we, like every other quality that we have got through colonialism, even the dresses that you and I are wearing today, this is, you know, to do with the Western approach,
Yes.
Western influence in our lives. We embrace those Western influences and we now thrive on them to say that this is our culture. But actually, our culture, historically, from whatever religion, was all about ahimsa. It's about giving the rights and treating every human being and animal
Yes.
with kindness. So corporal punishment, humiliation, degradation, submission, none of those things were actually part of our culture. It's a misnomer.
Yeah.
It's a misguided principle.
So what's the legal status today in Sri Lanka?
Okay. We signed the UNCRC in 1992 and ratified it. That means that we accepted that this is going to be part of our law. That was in 1992. There are now 196 countries that have signed up to this treaty with the UNCRC, not a treaty, the contract.
Convention.
Yeah, the committee's rights. Out of that, there are 54 countries that have banned corporal punishment in all settings, including homes and schools and other institutions. And there are 134 countries that have signed up to ban corporal punishment. They have banned corporal punishment only in schools. Okay. Unfortunately, Sri Lanka is now the minority. We were one of the countries that signed up right at the beginning, and we are still struggling to ban it in any form of setting. In 1992, once we signed up to it, in 1995, we amended some of our penal code laws. The first one that we amended, the only one, was 308. Henceforth, it's called 308A. As amended, and in it says that corporal punishment is a criminal act.
Yeah.
But even then, they have said that it should cause significant injury or discomfort, and actually the UNCRC is very explicit. They have mentioned that banning or ending corporal punishment needs to be done without any doubt in all the law books explicitly. Okay, so we do have a doubt in our system where they have amended 308, but Penal Code section 84 remains the same, which says that if you're under the age of 12, and that in itself is illegal because a child is up to the age of 18. So, but in our Penal Code, a child is defined as the age of 12. Anyone under the age of 12, if you punish them with a good intention, it's not a criminal act.
Good faith.
Good
Yeah.
faith. And also in our own Penal Code 341I, section 1, 3411, it says that if a schoolmaster flogs a student in good faith, it's not punishable by law, it's not a
The
criminal act.
illustration, let's see.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have this confusion, therefore, and it needs to be rectified. We need to have, so that it's not explicit according to the what we signed up to. So it needs to be that we have to rectify this in our own system so that the law is clear, and the punishment, or I really don't like the word punishment or the rehabilitation or the penalty that the person has to face has to be according to the punishment. And I don't particularly endorse putting people behind bars. By the way, our campaign is not about against a particular teacher or a principal or a school. It's actually about the whole community getting involved in awareness and reducing the incidence of corporal punishment. And that can only come from educating the teachers, giving them the right training and the tools on alternative positive disciplinary procedures, and also maybe give them a thorough training in child psychology. And I believe that coming back to my first comment as to why I feel that it affects, and there are 3 victims in corporal punishment, is, you know, in our routines, any form of complaint, no matter where you are, whether it's in a bank, a school, or any other organization, if you make a complaint, the first thing that happens is that there is a concrete wall that comes in front. Yeah. And everyone starts to deny it, and they seem to protect the perpetrator rather than the victim, yes, which is very sad. And so the first thing that we need to have is an open policy within schools. I mean,
zero tolerance. Yeah.
Zero tolerance. We should have a policy in every school, whether it's national or international school, Montessori or higher education system, where there is a child, there should be a policy to say that there is zero tolerance, and if there is an incidence of punishment, please come to us, please discuss it with us, and here is the person who can deal with it. A nominated person should be there, and that is what happens in the West. They're called responsible officer or a child protection officer. Yes. Okay, I think we should have that in our system as well. That's the first thing. So then the child will feel it's not their fault. What happens is that the child feels that it's their fault. Okay. Then the next thing that happens is that the parent becomes isolated, yeah, within the school for complaining. So you have the group who adores punishment, yeah, you know, taking up against the rights of the parents to say, well, what harm does it do? Let your child be punished. Let our children be punished. And that's no way forward, okay? And then what happens is that even the teacher, because they regret afterwards, it eats them alive, actually, mentally, and they can either try to stay within the school, but if the complaint is vigorous, mm-hmm, and forthright, mm-hmm, they might either have to resign or they will have to be sacked, yeah, and that then affects the teachers. So there are so many victims from punishment, the way I see it. So our campaign particularly is called End Corporal Punishment in Sri Lanka, Vision 2020. The first phase is to end corporal punishment within schools and eventually in the homes. Doing it in schools, in an open place, in a public place, is much easier than trying to do it in closed-door situations, circumstances. So our campaign is all about ending corporal punishment in schools.
Okay. Now, there is a certain group of people, I mean, their argument is basically, okay, so this is just because the international community is saying no, should we change our age-old practices? And they also say, you know, if there's an example, they say if you make a curry without stirring it
yes,
properly,
the Kirihod, the story, yeah, yes.
So it will not turn out properly. So what is our rationalization?
Okay, well, so I've just explained to you that this is not our culture.
Not our culture,
it was banned long time ago by our own kings and queens. At that time, we've embraced a foreign culture. This is not something that we are doing because the foreign agencies are telling us to do. In fact, we have signed up to so many contracts. The SARC, the Summit, the UN Human Rights, the UNCRC, which is the Children's Act, so on and so forth. Then we should all be living in isolation in a bubble. The reason why we have signed up for these things and we want to be part of the world is that we can send our children to those countries, we can have exchanges, we can get the knowledge, the developed knowledge from them, and we try and be better than what we are. So to embrace an age-old tradition as saying that is more beneficial when clearly the research shows that it is non-beneficial, I think is plain stupidity.
Yes.
You know, there is no other word for it.
Yeah.
And I believe it's time that we moved on, because there was a time when I grew up, not so long ago, when I was in my A-level class, we had a little boy working for us. And when I finished medical school, the law had already changed within 3 to 4 years. It was banned. It banned almost overnight. It became so severe, the punishment now, even though we have so many difficulties in our domestic situations, we don't even think about it. We're not tempted to go to the nearest orphanage and pick up a child and bring home. Why? Because the law became so severe, and that we changed our values, our customs. So it can be done. There is no need for this stubbornness.
So maybe another 2-3 years we'll look back and
we have to. We don't have to wait 2-3 years. We need to start now, because when we were assessed, you know, signing up to these conventions and committees and rights and laws, international laws, is not a joke. We get assessed periodically, reviewed, both nationally and internationally. And the last time that we went in front of the UNCRC was in February of 2018. And they have given us a damning report, and now Sri Lanka is placed on the red alert, because since 1992 we have had so many general elections.
Made so many promises.
Yes, we've made so many promises. We've actually had 6 general elections, 9 prime ministers and 5 executive presidents. And we have not banned corporal punishment. So Sri Lanka is now in the red alert since 2018 of February. And our next assessment is coming up in 2020, hence our campaign 2020, that when we go in front of the international community, we don't want to be humiliated as a country, as a nation, that we are incapable of looking after our own children. We in our organization are all Sri Lankan. We live in Sri Lanka. We work in Sri Lanka. Our children go to school in Sri Lanka. We have a right to speak, to protect our children. We do not want to be humiliated or being told that you are incapable of looking after your own children. So we are taking the stance, we are acting now that we can protect and secure our rights and our children's rights. And I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yes. So you're very passionate about this cause. Now you have grouped with some other academics, professionals and human rights activists. So could you share your experience? I know you have a personal experience.
Yes. Often people get attracted to such life-changing commitments when disaster strikes their own. And my 11-year-old daughter, at the beginning of this year, in 2018, was subjected to corporal punishment in an international school. And unfortunately, when I tried to take action, and that wasn't the first time, it had happened serially, and when I tried to take some action, I got this concrete wall from the school, so much so that I was compelled to go to the police on this occasion. And then I got the police officers, the OICs, giving me their personal views that Miss apita gahuwa tuwalayak nathi hinda, that sort of attitude. Then I was and then the harassment starts, where the child is cornered, she becomes a mental wreck, unfortunately. So then I had to take the matter forwards to the Child Protection Authority, who have commenced investigations, and there's a criminal case going on. But then I realized how crooked, how completely dysfunctional this system is that is supposed to protect our children. And the more I read about the rights, about the law, the more I realized that we are in a no-win situation. For a start, we have a law that is contradicting each other. We have people in higher positions who are supposed to protect our children in contradicting each other, contradicting. We even have a Human Rights Commission that does not protect private citizens unless you are taking a state organization to task. So basically, if a child goes to an international school or a private school here in this country, unfortunately, that again is the fault of our Education Act, which was designed so many years ago when international education was never thought of. But now in international schools, we have 95% Sri Lankan students learning in these institutions. And those children are not protected by the government circulars, which were sent in 2005 and 2016, specifically saying to the government schools that corporal punishment is disallowed, and there are many recommendations of alternative disciplinary processes, and also a specific chapter saying that if you subject a child to corporal punishment, we can take legal action against you, criminal action against you. That protection is not there for the international students or the private students. And so my whole organization came about, this whole campaign came about from my child, but for and on behalf of other children, to protect on a wider community basis.
So you're speaking about schools in Colombo. So when you go outside, you know, outside of Colombo, probably the scenario is more worse, I guess. I mean, you have some statistics, right?
Yes, we do. We've from our very own in May of 2017, which was just last year. There was a wide research undertaken by the National Child Protection Authority in 5 or 6 districts, and the statistics were quite shocking. The data was quite shocking. They conducted the survey within a span of 1 term, which is 3 months, and during that 3 months, 80% of students were subjected to corporal punishment.
At least in one way.
In some way or form.
Yes.
And of them, in these 6 districts, 52%, 5 or 6 districts, I beg your pardon, 52% of students in schools were subjected to physical abuse, which is the extreme of corporal punishment. So more than half. And that is glaring, heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, shocking data.
Yeah.
And that is not just from Colombo.
And more surprisingly, I think 60% of the teachers
admitted that they do it. And the commonest reasons, of course, were things like forgetting to do homework, and forgetting to wear the uniform correctly, or for having, you know, simple crushes, love letters, or
that children do not deserve to be punished.
Absolutely not. It's all part and parcel of growing up to enjoy the opposite, company of opposite sex and attractions, and this is what growing up is all about. And I remember not so long ago, at the beginning of this year, when a certain principal was forced to kneel down. The whole country went up in arms. Perhaps it was the time of local elections, so there was a big political campaign when everyone was talking about the rights of this teacher and how disgraceful the whole situation was. But we hear of children being punished, gruesomely punished, on a daily basis when we turn on TV or on social media. And we never hear of justice being done for any of these children. And I firmly believe that it is time that, 1, we change the law, and change the law once and for all explicitly, and 2, we change our attitudes.
Yeah, and also let's talk about the alternative, methods of positive discipline. To what extent are they being used currently?
Okay, so all of these have been done in some way or shape when teachers undergo formal training, although it's not to such an extent. But what we are proposing through our trump card, which is called the Pentagon proposal, this is bringing 5 key government stakeholders who are responsible for the welfare of our children, starting with His Excellency the President, who is responsible for all our safety as the head of state, then the Minister and Ministry of Education, Children's Affairs, Law and Order, and Justice. These are the 5 key organizations that come into play when there is something serious that goes wrong with our children. So our Pentagon proposal is in several stages. First is, of course, to change the law. Second, is there is a national child protection policy which is on the pipelines. So many drafts have been done. It should have been tabled many times to the Parliament, but it's still stuck. So we are we're hoping to work with the relevant authorities, the National Child Protection Authority being the foremost organization, to pass it through. We want that to be the Bible to protect our children, as it were. Thirdly, we want the international schools to be regulated, because at the moment they're registered as businesses and no one's regulating anything in there. So we want the Ministry of Education to regulate it, and actually the Prime Minister at the time, and even now of course, Honourable Ranil Wickramanayaka discussed it and passed a cabinet paper on the 9th of May of this year. So I want that seen through, that international schools will be regulated, and once they are regulated, the circulars that went out without the international schools included should now be resent to all the schools and refreshed. And fifth is our training program for teachers. So I'll give you a very simple thing that we do. We've had lots of pilot projects. There is this star chart that we recommend. So for the younger age groups, we recommend a star chart. So it's all about focusing and rewarding good behavior. We don't encourage focusing on bad behavior. So the rewarding and encouraging good behavior, we say you do your homework, you will get a little star. So that's been going on for several years now, the star chart. And very recently, when we had our pilot project in some of the schools, a little 11-year-old came up to me and said, "Auntie, I don't like that." I said, "Why not, Buddha?" And he said, "Well, actually, I have 9 black stars and I only have 3 red stars." So when I went into it, and when it was the turn to speak with the teachers, I said, "How come this black star is coming about? Because we never recommended such a thing." "Oh, no, we give black stars if their behavior is bad, and we give red stars if their behavior is good." So the whole principle of rewarding good behavior and focusing on the good has crumbled because they have infiltrated their own ideas and started giving black stars. So for a child, that reward is not there. So for them to try to get that reward is useless, because all they're achieving is a negative mark. Okay. That's an international way of dealing with group misbehavior.
Okay.
It's called the rainbow. Okay. So there are 7 colors to the rainbow, 7 tiers. It works well with groups. You can do it for individuals. So you have let's say a bunch of students who are constantly shouting and being a little bit boisterous in class. So you tell the whole class, you divide them into groups, and this group goes into one. Or you can take one and divide this group and put the boisterous kids with the others, share them around. But whatever it is, the principle is you ask the groups to do a specific task and come back. It's got to be a measurable, simple task. For instance, you've got to finish your maths homework. So when the groups come back, having finished their maths homework, every group gets into the first tier of the rainbow. So the teacher can decide that they're going to give a little reward at either the first, the third, or the 7th tier. So the reward doesn't have to be anything expensive. It could be simply, you can watch a video of something, you can do a script or a play about the lesson. You can go out, yes, you can go outside and have the lesson in the garden, something that the kids will look up to. So what happens with this system, it has been proven, is that the kids who are disruptive, they realize, oh, my team didn't get to the level, we didn't get that reward because of me. Yeah. I've got to pull my socks up because my friends are now starting to be a little bit annoyed with me. Yeah. Okay, so what the friends will then do is, "Come on mate, you've got to do it, we've got to get this." So they try to help the weaker child tries to help themselves, and so there's camaraderie that happens. Motivation and group work. So you're working as a society, a tiny little society that works together, and that is so positive in our day and age, because when we have exams, there are instances when children don't even share their exam papers. It is so competitive and so unhealthily competitive, our education system, and this is a beautiful way that we can open out and make our children work together and grow up as citizens who love and cherish and help each other.
Yeah. So finally, what's in the pipeline?
Okay. So actually, we had a very successful walk on the 30th of September. We had people coming from all corners of Sri Lanka. We gave a petition signed by over 4,000 people, handed it over to the president who participated at the walk together with our Pentagon proposal. That was on the 30th of September, and I must admit, credit to him, he did write to several organizations within the Pentagon proposal on the 2nd of October itself. We had the 30th of September, the walk rather, saying that they should follow what is in the Pentagon proposal. Unfortunately, on the 26th, we had a few disruptions, and we are hoping that with the new cabinet now that we could go ahead with our plans. First and foremost is to try and push towards law reforms, at the same time to get the training program going on a district level basis, and we have a foolproof plan to do that. That's number one. Number two is that we, on the 18th of November, in line with the Universal Day of Children, which is meant for protection and rights of the child, we had a art competition, and we had the awards day, and we had almost 2,000 entries from all around Sri Lanka, and very vivid, very sad, shocking, and at the same time very emotive entries from children who actually want to end this themselves. So it's a great thing that children actually realize what's happening is wrong. And so we are hoping that we could have a national exhibition sometime in 2019, which will then end with a national conference and an awareness program which will be open to everybody in Sri Lanka. And hopefully by 2020, we're hoping every child who enters school, which will be at the age of 6 years, who enters school will be given a leaflet. By this time we should have this training program done and child protection officers set up within schools, that we will be giving a leaflet together with their book list to say that child corporal punishment is disallowed, and instead we are promoting positive reinforcement and positive behavior, and there is a certain person within the school that they can go and speak to, and perhaps get the 1929 and the Child Protection Authority more active on that part, because sometimes we find that even parents come and ask the teachers somehow gahala hari uganana, you know, they want the children to be punished. So hopefully by giving them this leaflet, we will truly have a new generation growing up without knowing, without being exposed to punishment.
So actually the mentality of the adults that need to be changed, and also creating a conducive environment for both the children as well as the adults.
They know it. They know it. That is why we gave up child labor in our homes. So I don't think it is rocket science that we need to give up hitting our children.
Yes, yes. So thank you very much for joining with us, and I wish you good luck, and hopefully you will join with us again.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that invitation very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tush. So dear friends, we hope today's session was useful to you. If you want to learn more about the Stop Child Cruelty program, you may visit their website at www.stopchildcruelty.com or write to us at help@knowyourrights.lk. And to receive future updates, you may like our Facebook page, Know Your Rights SL, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will be meeting you soon again to discuss more on this topic. I'm Rajeevi Mapalagama, and thanks for joining with Know Your Rights.
For more information, visit us at www.knowyourrights.lk or visit our Facebook page, Know Your Rights SL, or email us at help@knowyourrights.lk.